What's up, guys? If you've built your Milwaukee 8 motor already, you may have already had primary drive issues or you're about to. It's the new weakest link. I had a lot of problems with the stock parts. We're going to solve that problem right now. All right, guys, Tony from Tucker Speed here. So like I said, if you've built your motor or even if it's stock, you might have already had primary drive issues. If not, you've probably heard about them because there's a lot of weak links inside there. One of the things we see here at the shop with a lot of issues is the stock compensator ramp. You can see here I got one that we took out of a bike. You know, this ramp is just shattered into 3 different pieces. The stock compensator is a weak point. The springs get worn out, or if you've built the motor, there's just way too much tension on that compensator and it ramps up so hard that like something's got to give and it just explodes that ramp into 3 pieces. Another weak point is the stock clutch basket. It's just cast aluminum. It's not very thick, it's not very durable, it's not very strong. I mean, stock motors could break it. If you've built your motor, you got a cam upgrade, big bore, or even bigger, you're definitely gonna have clutch basket issues. So we're gonna install a Recluse clutch basket with the Recluse torque drive clutch plates in this setup. We're gonna do a Dark Horse Man of War compensator and then finish it with the Baker attitude adjuster, the primary chain adjuster. So we're going to walk you through step by step on how to install all of this stuff. If you're just doing a couple of these pieces, just the clutch basket or just the comp, this video will help you get through that. We have another video on how to take your primary completely apart and put it back together, so you can refer to that video as well. So stay tuned. I'm going to jump in and show you how to start taking this thing apart. All right, so I'm going to go through the parts list we have together. The hard parts are going to show you the tools needed to do this job and all your necessary gaskets and oils. Pretty straightforward, but just so you know exactly what you're going to need and can have it all laid out and ready before you start into the job. Like I said, we're going to finish this primary upgrade with the Baker attitude adjuster. It's a manual chain tensioner, kind of converting from the auto tensioner that's inside there. I'll show you how to install that when we get that far. The Dark Horse Man of War compensator comes with the comp, their little oil slinger. I would recommend replacing the compensator bolt. It's always a good idea to just start with a new one. And then onto the clutch, we're going to be using the Recluse torque drive plate setup. That setup has been one I've been running in my race bike for a few years now and had really good luck with it. We do a lot of them here in the shop on all the street applications, and they just have really good engagement. They're really durable, can hold a lot of horsepower. They come with spring packs to hold, different horsepower and torque combos from light, medium to heavy. So that's nice. And then the last thing is the Recluse billet clutch basket. One of the big weak points in the primary is that stock clutch basket. So the basket is a little tricky to install. You got to kind of grind apart the old setup, install the new basket on the old ring gear and sprocket. I'm going to show you how to do all that. The last thing you're going to need is a new clutch hub bearing to put into the new basket. And then after that, you just need primary gasket, derby cover gasket, drain plug O-ring, and a quart of fluid, and you should be ready to rock. So I'll jump in, we'll talk about tools, what you're going to need to get the job done. And all these parts will be linked in the description below. All right, so going over a tool list real quick, you're going to need a T27 Torx, 5/16 Allen, 3/16 Allen, 1/4" Allen, 7/16, 1/2 inch, 9/16, 5/8 socket, a couple of extensions, a couple of different ratchets, some snap ring pliers. You're going to need the 1 3/16 socket and the T70. This one is a special tool, so you'll need to track one of those down. Some snap ring pliers, torque wrenches. You're going to need a 1/2 inch impact gun of some sort, whether it be battery powered, electric, pneumatic, whatever, and a cutoff wheel to grind off the old rivets off of the clutch basket. So other than that, everything's pretty basic, pretty quick. You'll need some shop rags, some Loctite to go back together, some Teflon to put on the drain plug when you're all said and done. So yeah, that's kind of a list of what you're going to need to do this project. So we're going to jump over on this 2020 Road Glide, start taking everything apart, showing you what we need to do to go back together. Before we jump into this, please smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell to keep notified of upcoming videos. Right, Jay?
That's right, and for every subscription, we're going to take the Whapper and I'm going to hit it right on Jordan's backside. No?
All right, so we're going to jump over here, get onto the bike, start getting everything torn apart. Some of the first things I'm going to do, I'm going to pull the drain plug, get the derby cover off, get some of these foot controls out of my way so that I can get the cover off. Grab my 5/8 socket, I'm going to pull this drain plug here first, get the oil draining. All right, so I got oil draining while I let that sit and drain for a minute. I'm gonna get this footboard out of the way and this foot peg out of the way. The 5/16 Allen here to pop off these foot controls. I'm gonna bust through this removal pretty quick. If you have any more questions on, you know, kind of how to take some of this apart, we have another video, how to completely disassemble the primary case. So you can also refer to that video if you have any more questions, or if I kind of glazed over this too fast. On the late model touring models, they've got a 5/16 Allen on the top and a 1/4" Allen below. So I'll pop both of these off to get this foot peg mount out of the way. I like to use a long extension for stuff like this. It just gets my ratchet away from the bike. I'm not swinging it and hitting anything. It's just habit. Kind of lay this stuff out aside, just kind of keep it organized. I'm gonna grab my T27 and pop this derby cover off. I use my impact gun for this stuff. You can just use your regular hand ratchet if you prefer. All right, after that, we're gonna pop the primary cover off, get it out of the way. Just a little tip, I'll loosen this top one in the middle and just leave it. And I'll go around and remove the rest of them. Now that I've got them all out and I have just that one top center one loose, I'll kind of just pop this loose. I like to use a long drain pan because it'll catch all the oil that's going to drain from here. So I'll just pull this, kind of let it hang from that one bolt, let all that oil kind of drain out of there. It just keeps it from making a big mess. Let that sit there and drain for just a second. Get this cover off, start pulling the drive components out, and then diving into clutch disassembly, and then showing you how to put the recluse stuff back together. First step in getting the drive components removed, I'm gonna use the zip tie trick to hold this auto chain tensioner down. I'm gonna try and kind of press it down as best I can and sneak this zip tie underneath, kind of feed it back behind. All right, got that zip tie around the chain tensioner. Kind of get a close-up shot here, showing you kind of how that zip tie is wrapped around the chain tensioner. So the tensioner has two 1/2" heck head bolts. I'm gonna just remove this thing real quick and get it out of the way. All right, next step, I'm gonna remove the bearing plate that's clipped into the pressure plate here. Just need a set of internal snap ring pliers. Push in on that, pull the snap ring out of the way. Set that aside because we're gonna need that later. Next thing is I'm gonna grab the T70 Torx, our 1/2" impact gun. All right, so we're gonna remove the compensator bolt. Compensator bolt is just a regular thread, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Go ahead and remove it. And then I'm gonna remove the clutch basket. That's the 1 3/16 socket. The clutch basket is reverse threads, so it is righty-loosey. Pull that clutch nut out, grab that front sprocket and the clutch basket, pull it off as an assembly. I don't know if you caught that, but I left this bolt just kind of halfway threaded in so it couldn't fall off while I was messing with the clutch. Get that threaded off, pulled off and set aside here. So now that we've got this far, because on this bike we're removing and replacing the compensator with Dark Horse assembly, we'll go ahead and remove the stock ramp. This is the ramp, the piece that decides to, you know, split into 3 pieces. Get that out of the way, get the spring pack out of the way, and that shaft extension. I'm not gonna be reusing any of this, so I'm just gonna set it aside and get it out of my way. All right, so the next step in this is just gotta get the chain off of the sprockets. But before I do that, I wanna make note of my direction of rotation on this chain. So I'm just gonna take a paint marker, kind of mark a couple of these links so that I know that this is the outside of the chain. So when I go back on, the chain will be moving in the same direction it was before. I'll go ahead and remove the compensator sprocket, get it out of the way. I'm not going to be reusing it, so I'm going to just get it out of here. Take the chain off of the clutch sprocket. I'll just set the chain aside here. Now that we have our clutch in hand, I'm going to go back on our fab table here, disassemble this and show you the process of grinding these rivets out and then putting the new recluse basket in. So we'll walk back there and get going. All right, so I got my clutch sitting on the bench here. A couple of tools that I didn't talk about earlier is a 10mm socket to remove the pressure springs off the clutch basket, and then kind of a dead blow and a punch to drive these rivets out after we grind the heads of them off. So I'm gonna go ahead, because I'm not reusing any of this stuff, I'm not gonna be super careful on how I'm taking these plates out. I'm just gonna kind of zap everything apart and get everything out of there. I like to just walk these out evenly. Because they're under a spring load, it'll bring this plate up kind of evenly, so just kind of work them up a little bit at a time. until you see that like the spring tension is released off of it. All right, so we get the springs and the spring plate out of the way. Set that one right there. Get this pressure plate pulled out of here. Set aside. Because I really don't care about these plates, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tip this over and kind of dump these plates all out. So everything came out minus one of the little judder springs that are down in the bottom there. Right, so I got it out of there. So make sure you get everything out of there. Our next step, we got to press this hub out of the clutch bearing here. I guess that's another tool that I forgot to mention. We're going to need some external snap ring pliers to remove the snap ring on the back of the clutch bearing. We'll need a hydraulic press to press this apart and back together. All right, so I got a little bit heavier duty snap ring pliers here. Get this snap ring removed off the backside of the clutch hub. Remember to wear your safety glasses too in case this thing decides to shoot out of there. I'll try and make it look easy. Maybe not. There we go. Set that aside. We are going to reuse that later, so keep it in a safe spot. I'm going to get this set up in the press and get this hub pressed out of the clutch basket. We want to thank our sponsors, the Law Tigers. The Law Tigers are motorcycle accident attorneys. Scott and his crew across the nation ride, and they understand our culture. If you've been in a motorcycle accident, the Law Tigers should be your first call.
Give us a call. We'd love to help you out.
Okay, so I got this thing set up in the hydraulic press here. I mean, this is just kind of your run-of-the-mill Harbor Freight hydraulic press. You can pick them up for pretty cheap if you don't already have one. They're nice to have around. You'll use it for a lot of different things. So like I said, I got this set up. I got just some steel blocks here. It's actually supporting the chain sprocket here. It's the most solid surface, and we're gonna drive the hub out of the bearing. The hub we're gonna be reusing, so just take care not to damage it. I got a little sleeve here that'll press and go through the ID of the clutch hub bearing. So I'll go ahead and get this thing pressed out. I just put my hand underneath to try and catch the hub once it breaks loose. It's not a heavy press, it's pretty light. All right, got the clutch out of the clutch basket and sprocket assembly. Like I said, we're gonna be reusing the hub, set that aside somewhere safe. And the next step is to grind the rivets, separate the basket from the sprockets, and then we'll be ready to start reinstalling. Okay, now we got the clutch basket fully disassembled. We've got the hub pressed out of it, everything's out. The last thing we gotta do before we start grinding on these rivets, grab this snap ring that holds the bearing in the backside of the basket, because we're gonna need this for later. It's another pretty stout snap ring. Get that guy removed and set aside. So now you can see we got these rivets that basically hold the sprocket and the cast aluminum hub together. We're basically gonna grind all these down flush, and then we're gonna drive them through with our punch and hammer and get these separated so that we can pull the sprocket off of the basket. So I'm gonna go ahead and start grinding these, whatever kind of grinder you have. I'll usually use this to get a lot of the big material off. I'll use like a flat disc to kind of get down smooth. You don't wanna take too much material off of this hardened steel sprocket, because it's gonna be reused. So, just try and just take the material off the top of the rivet head. So I'm gonna go ahead and start grinding on these guys. All right, so now that I've got the heads of these rivets kind of ground off and kind of smoothed off, we take our punch, hammer, just kind of drive them straight down and through the basket. Got all those rivets punched out. They take a little bit of work, but they'll come out of there. Once you got those all out, the sprocket should come off the basket, leaving the old bearing. If we were trying to reuse this bearing or whatever reason, you wouldn't want to be grinding all that metal next to it, because that bearing is pretty much useless, but we're putting a new one in, so we don't really care about it. I'm going to take this sprocket, I'm going to clean it up really nice, get it ready to start reinstalling the new basket onto it. So We're basically at the point now where we're gonna start going back together with everything. Okay, so we're ready to press the bearing into the basket. Right now I have the basket in the oven warming up and I have the bearing in the freezer. I'm gonna grab those and then get them ready. Hopefully if everything goes well, the bearing will just drop into the basket with no issues. So, shut up, Owens. Okay, so I got the basket out. It's hot. The bearing is frozen. Put a little bit of lube on this, get bad boy. Just like that. All right, this basket is still super hot. We're gonna let this basket cool off for just a second, then I can get the bolts in and attach the basket to the ring gear is our next step. Okay, I got that cooled off. I'm gonna put the snap ring in place. Make sure that snaps in good and is in the groove. So the next step here is to attach the basket to the ring gear. So got that lined up with the holes in the ring gear. I've got my bolts lined out here. I'm just gonna drop 2 in there, flip this up, and get 2 of the nuts started. The basket comes with some supplied Loctite, so you'll wanna use that. Get Loctite on these. All right, now I got 2 of the nuts started, at least it won't go anywhere. All right, so I got all those snug down. You wanna make sure that none of them have kind of come out of place in their groove on the inside of the basket. And we'll torque these down to 80 inch-pounds. I always like to just do it in a star pattern and then I go back around and do all of them again, make sure I didn't skip one. Got the basket all installed into the ring gear. Last thing I need to do before we can start putting the clutch plates in is just press the hub into the clutch bearing. I got it set up in the press here, put a little bit of lube on there. So I have a socket underneath setting on the inner race of the clutch bearing, kind of supporting the bearing there. That's it. It presses in pretty easy. Last thing, I just need to put the clip on the back side of the hub and then we're ready for clutch plates. There it is. Clutch packet or clutch basket is fully assembled and ready for clutch plates. All right, we've got the bearing pressed back in the hub, got the hub pressed into the bearing, the snap ring installed in the backside. Now we're ready to start assembling the clutch plates into the basket. Right now I have all of my fiber friction discs soaking in oil right now for just a couple of minutes before we start putting those in. We're going to install these, what do they call these guys? Forget what they call them, the basket sleeves. So we got to install all the basket sleeves. We have 3 thick friction discs and then 12 of the thin ones. And then we have 1 thick steel plate that's got a larger ID and then 13 of the regular thinner steel discs. So I've counted everything. Everything's here. We got plates soaking. I'm going to put all these sleeves in. I got a couple in place here. If you can see with the closed end going down, kind of install those, slide them down into the slots in the basket. The recluse instructions are pretty good in explaining how all this goes together and in the order the plates all go together. All right, got all the basket sleeves installed. You got to remember we do need this little thin washer. So first step in putting the plates together, this is the spring seat and the little judder spring that comes from the stock plate kit. So you'll need to reuse these from the stock setup. The flat one is going to go down in first, and then the judder spring, kind of with the concave facing up, you're going to drop that down in there on top of that flat spring seat there. Get those down in there, and then the next step, the first plate to go down in is one of the thick friction plates. You'll kind of see they're kind of aluminum. It's aluminum plate, got the friction material. It's thicker than all the others. I'm going to go ahead and drop it in. The other thing to notice is these plates, every other little finger here has a groove in it. You'll want to line all those up. Sometimes this first plate going in with the basket sleeves is kind of tricky. So those basket sleeves will want to keep it held up. So it gets a little tricky to get this first one kind of started here. I got that first thick friction plate down in, get the steel put in, and then we're going to basically drop in the thin steel alternating until we get to the last two. The last 2 plates, we're going to hold off and install those onto the pressure plate. I'm going to make sure this next one, the groove that was in the first one is lined up here, so those grooves are all lined up. This is the second of 3 on the thick friction plates. It's the last one we install. I got one more thick friction sitting in the oil, and then the large OD steel plate left to go that's going to get installed onto the pressure plate. So once we get those all installed, alternating every other, and we get to that second thick plate, is now when we grab the pressure plate, kind of lay it flat, and we're going to put the last thick friction plate on it, lay it onto the pressure plate there, and then that large large ID steel plate, place it onto the pressure plate there. You gotta flip this over, holding those 2 plates kind of onto the pressure plate. You gotta line up the groove with the plates and then also get the pressure plate kind of in the right place. Kind of drop those down in there. Wanna make sure everything seats down there fully. When you get everything in, that last friction disc will be sitting below the top of the clutch basket there. That way you know everything's kind of in place. So for this setup, we're gonna run the purple banded clutch springs. This bike makes about 140 horsepower, so these are the mid-weight springs. Go ahead and set it up with those. Get this spring plate installed. I'm gonna put a dab of Loctite on these screws here. All right, I'm gonna run these screws down just a quarter turn at a time. I'm gonna go ahead and torque these to 90 inch-pounds here. Clutch is reassembled, ready to go back into the bike. We're gonna get the chain put on it. We're gonna get the compensator, the Dark Horse compensator ready, the Baker attitude adjuster ready, start putting this thing back together. Okay, we got all the new parts laid out here. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take one of these 5/16 screws out of the Baker attitude. You're gonna want to install it first. This is a little bit different than the stock adjuster, but you're gonna want to install it first before the chain drive. I just kind of get it in there with one screw just to kind of hold it in place. It has this plate that goes on the front of it. The other screw, I'm gonna set it aside. I'm gonna get my chain put back on my sprockets. I got my paint marks on there from earlier. And get it put back on the clutch sprocket. Get the new Dark Horse Man of War comp sprocket here. Now on this Dark Horse Man of War sprocket, you're gonna want to follow the instruction sheet here. You're gonna want to check your crankshaft run out, and you're also gonna want to do some chain alignment. We've already set all this up on this bike previously, so I'm not gonna redo it again. So I'm gonna skip that step here, but we're gonna have another video that kind of covers that topic, and then worst case, just follow the instruction sheet that comes with that Man of War sprocket. We got this assembly ready. Go ahead and get it started onto the main shaft. I'm kind of holding this chain up high. That takes a little bit of finesse there. It's really hard because you don't have a ton of room with that chain tensioner underneath the chain to kind of get everything spread out enough to get them on their respective shafts, but it is doable. Might take you a couple minutes to get it there, but it will go. So we got clutch pushed all the way in, the sprocket all the way in. We're gonna go ahead and get these things torqued down, and then we'll get the chain deflection set, and we should be set. The Dark Horse comes with this oil slinger. Make sure you get it installed correctly, or a new bolt with Loctite installed. Go ahead and get this started, thread it in all the way. Something you didn't see is making sure all the threads are clean. Clean out all the old Loctite. I've cleaned them out of the old clutch nut and off of the main shaft. I've got new red Loctite installed. Go ahead and run this clutch nut all the way in. If you can't run this all the way in by hand, then you haven't cleaned the Loctite off enough, and it's gonna give you a false torque and it's gonna come loose. So make sure you clean all that Loctite off. When you have my primary lock bar, there's the I'm gonna torque the compensator bolt first. Final torque on this is 175 foot-pounds. Got my T70 here, primary lock bar. Jam these in the sprockets here. All right, we got that to 175. Torque this clutch hub nut, 70 to 80. Remember, this is reverse thread. Okay, we got the compensator torqued. I got the clutch torqued. Now we're ready to get the primary chain tensioner set. I'll walk you through the process there because it's a little bit more involved than the auto tensioner that comes stock. So get ready to get that set up, get the cover put back on, and we'll be done. Our next step is to set chain deflection. I picked the rear wheel up in the air. I'm gonna pull 2 outside spark plugs real quick. And the reason I'm doing this is I gotta rotate the motor because I wanna check this chain in a couple of spots to make sure that I don't have any tight spots. All right, so our correct chain deflection on this with it cold is 5/8 to 7/8. I just got a little metal mechanics ruler here that I like to use. Right now it's like fully collapsed, so there's a ton of slack there. We do need to finish reinstalling this, so gotta put this plate and this other screw back in. So I'm gonna remove that 1 5/16 bolt that we installed earlier just to hold it in place. I'm gonna remove that 7/16 nut that's on the end of the shoe here. I'm gonna load these up with a little bit of Loctite, get these two installed. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of pick up on this shoe and then hold it into the groove, and then I'm gonna tighten down this 9/16 lock nut here. Just gonna loosely kind of tighten everything, and then I'm gonna check this chain deflection. The way I like to do it is just kind of mark the top of the chain and then push it up. So right there I'm about 5/8, so I'm on the tight side. So I'm gonna roll it over and check it in a couple more spots and see where I'm at. That spot right there is actually measuring at about 3/4 of an inch. So it's a little looser right there. That's measuring at about 3/4 as well. That's measuring at 3/4. Seems like it's pretty much right at 3/4 all the way around. So I'm gonna go ahead and torque this thing down. So I'm gonna go ahead and torque this 9/16 nylock down first. It's like 21 to 29, so I'll just go to 25. Torque the 1/2 inch hex heads here. They're 18 to 24, so I'm gonna go about 20 foot-pounds on these. On the little 7/16, I'm just gonna run it in. I usually just go about hand tight on that little guy. All right, I gotta put the bearing plate back in the clutch plate, or in the pressure plate. Get my snap ring pliers, kind of push that thing in. Gotta really push against that hydraulic if it's a hydraulic clutch, or make sure your snap ring fully engages into the groove, and we're done there. We're ready to put a cover on and pour oil in it. All right, last piece of the puzzle. All we got to do is reinstall the cover. One thing with the Baker attitude adjuster, before you do that, you got to remove this little sound dampener from the inside of the primary cover. I've already got this broken loose, but go ahead and remove that out of there. The new adjuster, that bolt will interfere and won't let the cover go on. So get rid of that guy, get a new primary cover gasket installed here. All right, I'm gonna put Loctite on all these primary cover bolts. I got all those loosely installed. I'll get them torqued. Again, these are like 90 to 110. Okay, got the cover on, torqued. I got a new drain plug O-ring, loaded up with a little bit of Teflon here. Now we're ready. We'll get some oil poured into this thing. The foot controls back on, put the spark plugs back in, and it's ready to rock. Drain plug in, give it a quick torque, 14 to 21 foot-pounds on that. Pour in a quart of Motul primary fluid. Got a new orange derby cover O-ring in there. So I'll get these derby cover bolts torqued. Again, these are like 80 to 110 inch-pounds. You want to torque these in as kind of a star pattern. I'll get these foot controls put back together, and we are pretty much done here. Okay, I got the foot controls put back on. I'm gonna just pop this back down into neutral. Much easier to do it now with that rear tire still up in the air. Get my plugs put back in. All right, that's it. That's all of it, wrapping it up. Got everything installed. It's ready to hit the road. I hope you found this video informative and helpful. If you have any questions, just please drop them in the comments below or shoot us a message somehow. We'd love to help you out. Everything that we used here should be in the link below. You can find all this stuff at tuckerspeed.com, and we'll keep these videos rolling. We'll see you next time.